It's my pleasure to invite to the stage to say a few words to welcome each and every one of you this morning. Invictus Blue Group's Chief Executive Officer. How about a big hand to welcome Gerald Miranda, ladies and gentlemen.
Young Berhormat, Yeo Bee Yin, Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to SB'19KL. We are delighted to host the Sustainable Brands community here again in KL for the 5th consecutive year. Here we will discuss the regenerative goals and reporting that will carry us through to the next decade. We have in our midst today policymakers, corporate captains, and business leaders, NGOs, as well as eminent individuals. One goal unites us all, which is to find new ways for brands and businesses to deliver individual success and a healthy economy in today's increasingly complex world. So far this year, over 6,000 members of the Sustainable Brands community worldwide have come together in Tokyo, Istanbul, Paris, Detroit, and now in KL to explore new ways to deliver meaningful value to our stakeholders. At SB and the Invictus Blue Group, we strive to be the home for courageous optimists because we believe that amplifying the positive is a critical strategy. All of us are experiencing the impact of climate change, which will get worse before things get better, if at all. We are in the throes of massive environmental and social disruptions. Every day, the world experiences the drastic impact of climate change. Glaciers are shrinking, and we hear about the mess that we've made of our rivers, lakes, and oceans. Many species of fish that we have all grown up with are now functionally extinct. Breakthroughs in material science and explorations on circularity show real potential for fruitful solutions. At this two-day conference, we will look at how businesses have successfully equipped themselves further to take on the mantle of embedding aspects of sustainability. The road of integrating sustainability into business operations is not an easy one. It is with this in mind that we bring you Future Forward, which will focus on 3 fresh tracks to uncover insights, innovation, and tools to help you smoothen your sustainability journey. We are honored that our Minister Yeo Bee Yin will be sharing her thoughts on responsible consumption and the importance of establishing a circular economy. You will also hear thought-provoking insights and best practices from our esteemed speakers and panelists. A personal thank you to the special group of pioneers and thought leaders for their time today. We trust you will discover inspiration, new ideas, and new tools which will spark thinking on your own sustainability journey. We also hope you will forge new partnerships that can help you drive better business results whilst creatively contributing to a future-fit society. Finally, I wish to place on record our sincere appreciation to our many sponsors and partners, most notably Media Prima and TNB. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's Gerald Miranda, ladies and gentlemen, CEO Invictus Blue Group. Thank you for the nice, warm welcome remarks and giving us a brief outline of what we can expect for the next 2 days. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for the opening remarks, it's my pleasure to invite Daniel Krohn of Sustainable Brands US to say a few words. Let's give a nice warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel Krohn.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming to SB'19KL 19. This is the 5th annual event here. It's actually one of our longest running events, international events for sustainable brands. And I really want to say thank you to the team here for putting on this beautiful conference and in this beautiful venue. I'm very proud of their hard work and their dedication to helping us transition our world to a more sustainable and flourishing one. But as we all know, the work to transition never really stops. And many of the brands and communities that we work with are faced with new emerging challenges that will not only strain our abilities to adapt, but also present new opportunities to collaborate and innovate. From an SB worldwide perspective, here are a few of the main challenges that we're seeing in our events, in our communities, and from our brands around the world. Environmental and social challenges are increasing, taking center stage in conversations at all levels, from the chief executive's office all the way down to the janitor. Brands and businesses are being pressured to respond to all of these challenges. Consumers are changing their purchasing patterns, demanding more sustainable products. This does provide an opportunity for a already growing multi-trillion-dollar business. And so there are great opportunities for all of our brands and all of you to contribute to this. Brands that offer more sustainable products and solutions are growing faster and are more profitable, generating higher sales than brands that do not adopt these practices. Employees, the future generation, your future workers, want to work for authentic businesses. They want purpose in their work, and they want businesses that have a purpose. And shareholders are demanding more transparency on sustainability performances. These are just a few of the many, many challenges that we're seeing worldwide, and a lot of the different discussions and conversations that are taking place. For some of you, you may be new to sustainable brands, to this event, to this community. And so I just want to share a few thoughts about sustainable brands. We believe that brands are uniquely positioned to redesign the future of commerce and to shift our systems to align business and society for a more sustainable future. Brands who embrace this will prosper. So who is Sustainable Brands? Sustainable Brands is the preeminent learning, communications, and collaborations platform accelerating brand transformation for good. Our platform is meant to inspire, engage, and equip our community to win in a changing global marketplace. Sustainable Brands is one of the unique organizations around the world that has a global footprint. We can take your brand, your conversation, your work, and we can take you to different parts of the world, to new markets. We have 13 events across 5 different continents, anywhere from Brazil to here in KL, to Japan, to Paris, France, to Turkey, to US, and we have some new ones coming online in the future, such as India, Chile, and South Africa. As Gerald mentioned earlier, we have thousands and thousands of people attend our events every year and our workshops. Each year, we have over 500 companies employing over 5.5 million people and represent more than $2.9 trillion in sales, impacting over 5 billion consumers. We have multi-million visitors that attend or go to our SB.com page, where we have digital resources, newsletters, case studies, global events, and a lot of other information that can help your brand prosper. Some of the offerings that we have are different lines of business. We have our digital footprint. Going back to 2008, we have case studies and reports, for well over a decade of sustainability work from every brand that has participated over the years in our events and in our community discussions. We have our events. We have corporate membership, where we have over 100 corporate members, some of the biggest brands in the world, participate in our annual meetings, contribute their content, their learning, and their expertise. And recently, we've launched a few different new product lines. One of them is Brands for Good, which is really focused on consumer behavior and driving sustainable purchasing practices. Instead of pushing the consumer to participate and to buy these sustainable products, it's more pulling them along. And so understanding from a marketing and branding perspective what that looks like and what those behaviors are and how we communicate with those consumers. We'll be launching regional corporate membership. So if you're interested in learning more about becoming a corporate member like the US chapter, we have that opportunity to have that here in Southeast Asia, working with our KL team. And finally, tomorrow I'll be talking about the Brand Transformation Roadmap tool, which is focused on purpose, brand influence, operations, supply chain, and governance. And it's really helping you as an organization map out where you need to go and how to do it. With that said, I want to thank you all, and I hope you learn a lot. You meet new people, you make new networks, and you find opportunities to collaborate and innovate together. We will need everyone working in this area if we want to provide the sustainable, flourishing future we hope for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's Daniel Krohn, Sustainable Brands US, ladies and gentlemen. And from what he said, we can expect 2 days of very exciting conversation with regards to sustainable brands. And I just realized it's quite a long way to walk up the stage. There isn't one steps, there's no steps right in front. So, exercise, exercise, exercise. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and honor now to invite the Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change, or MESTECC in short, to address us in the opening keynote. Yang Berhormat YB Yeo Bee Yin, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Gerald, Miranda, CEO of Invictus Group and convener of Sustainable Brands KL. Mr. Niloy, Banerjee, UNDP, resident representative for Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. Mr. Daniel Krohn, head of international partnerships of Sustainable Brands US, esteemed members of the media, fellow sustainability partners and supporters, salam sejahtera, salam sayangi Malaysiaku, and very good morning to everyone. It is very good to be here today to see all of you, and I was made to understand that many of you come from different industries, and today we hope that this conference will bring you all together to share insights, and hopefully by the end of the conference, all of us can work together towards sustainable solutions for our future. It is also great to see companies like Invictus Blue and Sustainable Brands serious in putting their efforts to raise awareness in conference like this. It is a timely conference for Malaysian brands to rethink of how we do our business and rethink how is the way forward. Today I'm here to share with you a little bit of what is the progress in Malaysia and Malaysian policies in terms of sustainable development. Of course, as an Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change, my discussion will be mostly and geared towards energy, environment and climate change. Let me just give you an idea of where we are at as Malaysian. In terms of climate change, Malaysia has made a commitment signed the Paris Agreement in 2016 to make a commitment where we will reduce our carbon emission intensity, that is carbon emission per GDP growth, by 45% by 2030 relative to 2005 level. That will mean out of the 45%, 35% is unconditional reduction, 10% is conditional upon international help in terms of capacity building or financial assistance. We are at this moment at 33% of reduction. That would mean that we are very comfortable on reaching 45% goal by 2030. Therefore, the United Nations has approached Malaysian government to review our goal, our climate change goal, or whether or not we are going to increase our commitment into it. We are looking into that, and that decision will be made, will be announced together with all other countries in the Conference of Parties for United Nations Framework of Climate Change Convention 2020. So all the countries are right now at the midst of reviewing climate change goal and climate change, what we call NDC, National Determined Commitment, in the next Conference of Parties in the United Nations Climate Change Conference. So we are looking into that, but again, what I say is that Malaysia is really very comfortable in terms of reaching that goal. So really for us now to rethink whether or not we want to be more ambitious in terms of climate change goal. In terms of climate change, there are a couple of things I would like to share with you. There are, in climate change, how we want to do is to have mitigation and adaptation. A lot of times, a lot of people thinking about climate change is only about how do we reduce our carbon emission and not so much about how do we adapt to a 1 Celsius scenario. That means, let's say if the world is going to warm 1 Celsius, what is your brand or what is our country is going to do and how are we ready for it? Climate resilience is something that a lot of people have not talked about. And therefore, tomorrow, 2 days later, tomorrow onwards, we will have a 3 days International Green Tech and Eco Products Exhibition and Conference, and that on the second day of the conference, what we call IJAM, second day of IJAM, the Prime Minister will announce the country's effort in our climate change, and he will announce a project and establishment of how we want to coordinate the action in terms of adaptation as well as mitigation in terms of climate change. A lot of progress has been made. I want to share with you some of the things that have already been announced. The other things that has to be announced, it will be announced in the IJAM, because we are actually, this is in the IJAM week. After this conference, you can actually go to IJAM to really have a look. There are 10 more conferences there to really look into. If you want to be sustainable, we welcome you. There are so many discussions, so many conversations in Malaysia, especially in Klang Valley region, that you can go to many of them. And sometimes you see me in most of it, the events. I have repeat myself again and again in many things, because I just want to put into you that what is the progress of the government. So for some of the things that I can share with you today is in terms of renewable energy and energy efficiency, and a little bit about plastic. And so I hope that I can make it concise and deliver to you in the next 12 minutes, for example. In terms of renewable energy, the government has set a renewable energy goal, a new goal in 2018, that we will increase our renewable energy in our electricity generation mix by 20% to 20% by 2025. And that excludes large hydro generation above 100 megawatt. So if we include that, we will hit about 40% by 2025 in our electricity generation. So with that, electricity, to do that, again, in IJAM, we will tell you what we have done, what is our progress. But let me just quickly say that there are 3 main programs that we go under this. One is on net energy metering. In the beginning of this year, 1st of January, we have renewed our net energy metering policies where people with rooftop solar can sell to TNB on a one-on-one offset basis. So this will make very attractive for commercial and also for industry to take on net energy metering. For many of you here who are brands who comes from corporates, and if you have big buildings, do consider putting up solar panels, because now you can sell it to TNB, and it will, your capex, your savings in electricity bill will help you to have a return of your capex. Then government is giving you tax allowance to do that. So the tax allowance is a green investment tax allowance. All of this information is made available in www.seda.gov.my. Mark it down. if you want to be a sustainable brand, that probably is the first step to go. Put on, if you have a big building, put on solar panels so you can sell electricity and at the same time save some electricity bill. I've just had the privilege to launch one of the brand in their plant where they put on the biggest sofa, but the record is going to be broken very, very soon. Biggest sofa on a net energy metering project of 2.5 megawatt. I've talked to them, they say that the capex, the savings that come from it can pay out their capex in 5 years, excluding if they do not take into account the tax allowance. If they take into account the tax allowance, it reduced to as low as 2 years. So it's actually really making sense for people to go into sustainable. And the government wants to have policies that help you to go into sustainable and yet save your money. So the second thing that we work on is large-scale solar. Of course, many of you are not involved in large-scale solar, but maybe some banks will be involved in large-scale solar financing. We are closing that bid, and end of the year we will announce the winners. And of course, this is for the first time, I've repeated many times on this, is that for the first time in the history of Malaysia, that we have a solar generation cost that is lower than the average gas generation cost. This is the first time in the bid in the history, and it will be the beginning that renewable energy like solar, like the mature renewable energy technology will have a cost advantage over fossil fuel. So right now, what we are thinking as a country in terms of renewable energy is really not about that it will help to decarbonize our economy, but at the same time, it will help us to have a more diversified electricity mix, and at the same time, making it more affordable. Of course, for more elaboration, we really need more time, but suffice to say that it is no longer the case that we need to put on more money in terms of to decarbonize. If we are innovative enough, if we are driven enough, we can actually find solutions that will serve two purposes. One is on the environment, another one is on our profit. So that both can come hand in hand and not one or the other. And the third efforts that we are going through from renewable energy is on feed-in tariff mechanisms. The government continues to pay for a premium for biogas, biomass, and small hydro generation. All of these are to help us to achieve our 20% renewable energy in electricity generation mix by 2025. Again, we are on target, and we are putting all the action according to the time frame accordingly, and we are now well ahead of our goal. The second thing I would like to share with you in terms of energy is energy efficiency. We are drafting a bill on Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act that is for better energy reporting. But for brands around, all of you here, that maybe there's some of the things that you can think about when you go home to make yourself or make your corporate a more sustainable company. Think about it. So a lot of people are thinking that, electricity bill is so expensive. Can we cut electricity bill? But have you all ever think of how do we make our electricity use more efficient? I give you an example. In the whole of the total primary energy in Malaysia, 14% of our total primary energy of Malaysia is used for buildings. And more than half of the electricity used in Malaysia is used for building. A majority of what the buildings, the energy or the electricity used for buildings in Malaysia is cooling. So, but we have never thought that how can we make our cooling system more efficient? So if we can actually have an idea of how, of course, the bill is to help to push big energy users to be more energy efficient. But if you can actually help your corporates to be able to be more energy efficient, there are two things you can achieve. One, of course, you help to reduce your carbon footprint. Second, again, is to save the cost. And same goes to water. How do we become water efficient? And not only water efficient because we save the water bill, reduce the carbon footprint because treated water is very carbon intensive. You save the water, but at the same time, you also help to save your water bill. These are some of the things that I think is the lowest hanging fruits for companies to think about. Energy efficiency, solar, participating in net energy metering, and being more efficient in terms of resource allocation. All of these are not only about saving the world, it is also about saving the money in our pockets. So I think this is something that is very good for all of us to go. In terms of plastic, I just want to give you a brief idea of where we are in plastic. Last year, in iJam last year, actually I launched towards the zero single-use plastics by 2030 for our country. We are now at the phase 1 of this. Phase 1, of course, it is very easy, so it's just shopping bags, and we'll focus on shopping bags because it is one of the largest used shopping bags. Another thing that we would like to introduce in this whole roadmap, because I don't have time, so we are not going through the whole roadmap, but one of the things that we want to introduce in the phase 1 is to think about plastic. Think about this. We always talk about the environment efforts in 3R. Reduce, reuse, recycle. So how can we reduce our plastic usage? How can we reuse them? How do we recycle them? But the government of Malaysia would like to introduce the 4th R in terms of how we think of plastic, that is to replace. So how do we replace the hydrocarbon-based plastic with something that is alternative and eco-friendly? Therefore, because MESTECC also is a science and tech ministry, we actually, since this year, open up for R&D funds in terms of how do we close the gap, technological gap of finding an alternative to hydrocarbon-based plastic. We have to know that packaging is inevitable. There are some things that you can reduce, something you can reuse, something you can recycle, but sometimes it is inevitable. When it is inevitable, you need something that can replace the more polluting hydrocarbon-based plastic. So we have actually give grants. We have given, so far we have allocated 8.5 million R&D matching grant to 4 companies to do research in closing the gap of making biodegradable or eco-friendly plastic more cost affordable, or in between, making the process more efficient. 2 of the projects have been given to companies that do research on how do we develop a testing kit to differentiate between what is a biodegradable plastic and what is a hydrocarbon bag plastic. Because the moment you want to enforce, how do you enforce? What kind of plastics? Which one fit into what standard? So you need a rapid testing kit. And that testing kit needs a lot of technology in it. So we have also allocated 2 more that is on EFB processing, on empty fruit branch processing. So we are also, there is no taker yet for bioresins. We open up for bioresins research as well. Actually, each of these projects is to maximum of 5 million ringgit. But it depends on the scale of the projects. But all in all, what we want to do is to really gear towards how, in terms of reduce, reuse, recycle, we rethink how do we replace plastic. So of course, there are something that is not related to MESTECC, something that's related to local government ministry. For example, waste management. We are working together with local government ministry in terms of waste management, in terms of recycling, separation of waste, etc. So the whole idea is to really to replace it in the future, and hopefully making Malaysia a technological leader in this. Because when you are the first, just think about, we are not only talking about a 30 million population in Malaysia. The world is faced with plastic problem. Every year, 8 million tons of plastic is in the ocean. It's thrown into the ocean. If we don't do anything at all, one of the most famous research is by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. So, and by 2050, the population is going to grow to 10 billion people. We are going to face with problem. We're going to face with plastic problem all around the world. So one thing that Malaysia can do is, what will be the solution to that? So if we can find a solution to that, we are not only finding a solution for Malaysia, We are finding a solution for the world, and therefore there will be a new industry for it. Again, whenever the government is talking about pushing green agenda, we always making sure that as a developing country, we always make sure there is economic growth as well as jobs being created on the way of doing that. And I would like to also share about plastic in terms of transboundary movement of plastic. Whenever we talk about plastic, it is impossible not to talk about the movement of plastic all around the world. Unfortunately, the whole world, the total plastic usage of the whole world, 90% of them do not get recycled. Only 10% or less of the total global plastic usage are recycled. So a lot of people say recycling maybe is the way to go, but how soon? How soon? And that a lot of people, and we only realized in 2018, that we already realized that the developed country, every time they say that they are going to recycle their waste, they separate their waste diligently, make sure the plastic go one place, paper go one place, and the wet waste go one place, and then they diligently separate their waste. Where does this waste end up in? Many of them still at the ports in Malaysia. So they separately, what happened is this. People diligently separate their waste, thinking that these are going to be recycled. Eventually, it end up in the containers to the developing countries, half the globe away. This is the global, what we are trying to solve in the global level. That is why the recent Basel Convention, Malaysia has voiced out on this, and together with many other countries, they have made an amendment in the Basel Convention. Basel Convention is a control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste. So this one, they categorize plastic differently so that it can actually then control transboundary movement of plastic. All in all, the message I want to drive home is this. We cannot solve the problem of plastic by thinking just in the very close context of Malaysia. We have to think plastic in terms of a regional or in the global context, so we, in Malaysia part, we are also doing our part in terms of how do we voice out in the international platform so that the world deal with plastic movement, deal with international plastic movement around the world. We believe that by 2021, when Basel Convention amendment come into force, there will be more control of this plastic movement around the world. And the government is on the way of sending many of these containers back to the country of origins. So overall, I just want to say that it is not easy. Many of you come here just half a day and then you go home and you continue your work in the corporates. I just want to hope that this conference will give you inspiration so you can do something about it in the organization level. Many of you have customers, suppliers, the employees, people of your stakeholders that you can influence. If there is one thing that you want to do, that you want to bring home, just take one of it. But when you do it, make sure you do it excellently. So I really hope that all of these are not a shock scenery type of conference, not a conference you come and you receive a lot of knowledge. You say, we hope the government is doing more about this, and you yourself not doing enough for this. So I would like to really hope that all of us will come together and do our part in making not only Malaysia more environment-friendly, more sustainable Malaysia, but really hope that we also play our part as global citizens for the world, and hopefully our action can inspire actions around the world as well. With that, I would like to wish all of you a very fruitful 2 days conference ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Yeo. That's the keynote. And ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Minister has graciously agreed to be on the panel, our first panel discussion, which is the CEO Roundtable. We'd like to have all the panelists please take your positions on stage very quickly, and then we'll introduce you So here's what I'm going to do. Our panelists are in position. First up, of course, we have the Honorable Minister Yeo Bee Yin, who just spoke earlier on. And we also have with us the Deputy Secretary General, Environment and Climate Change, Dr. Nagulendran Kangayatkarasu. All right, there he is, all right. Mr. Niloy Banerjee, UNDP Resident Representative, Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. There he is. We have Mr. Dixon, YTL-SV Carbon CEO. There you are. Mr. Kumar Chander, Wipro Unza CEO, Southeast Asia. Mr. Martin Rich, Future Fit Business UK Executive Director. Dr. Zhang, the Dow Chemicals Company. Asia Pacific Sustainability Leader, Packaging and Specialty Plastics. Dato Noraini Sultan, there she is, Malaysian Plastics Manufacturers Association Vice President. And your moderator for the CEO Roundtable, ladies and gentlemen, is to your far left, okay? That's Doug Woodring, Ocean Recovery and Plasticity Convener, founder and MD. Over to you, Doug.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. We have a very renewably powered, packed panel here today, and it's going to be tough because we only have 45 minutes and a lot to talk about, and very smart people, 9 of them here on the panel. So what I'm going to do is ask a few questions, and I'm not going to go in a line because some people may feel strongly about a certain thing. So let's try to have 2 answers per question, and you have to be aggressive to get in your word. Otherwise, I'm going to move to the next person. But let's start with the Minister Yeo. When we're looking at this topic is about marine litter and plastic, and you made a few comments about that earlier. When we're looking at the triangle of the community of stakeholders who need to be part of this movement of change, that being the government, the consumers, and the private sector. What percentages do you put on importance of those pieces of that triangle in being the most needed to move the dial to guide the others along? Or is it even?
I think I'm not very sure to putting a percentage in it, but to me, as a government, it is very important that people get the message. And for example, we go into election every 5 years. It is not, it is actually quite impractical if government is doing something that people do not want. So that is why one of the first steps as an environment minister is actually we do a lot of SEPA projects. That means communication, engagement, and public awareness, so that people ask for it. When consumers ask for it, private sectors have to act, and the government have to act. So if the consumers can have a bottom-up demand for it, it will be the best to move the needles around. But government and private sectors, private leaders have a role to play to inspire them as well. So to put a percentage, I am not in a position. But just ask others, because I have spoken enough and we have very limited time. I hope to give the space to
does anyone else have a strong feeling about that? Which one is the stronger lever in this triangle of stakeholders?
Was that to me?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think that everybody has to work 100% at this. I mean, there is no easy way of splitting it, given the position that the world is in today. I think that there is a concern with consumers. I think corporates realize that to be accepted, they need to be doing something to make an impact. And I think even governments are realizing that, it is going to be very troubling unless they start taking steps as well. So in terms of effort, I think it has to be 100% effort across the board by all the 3 stakeholders that you mentioned.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a different question that's a similar space. So if you say 100% for everyone, then I'm going to take out the government. A lot of people say that the consumers need to do more. The consumers are not educated enough. The consumers don't know where to put it. So do you believe that the consumer is going to have more power in making this shift happen? Or does it need to be the private sector and the industry that is putting in more facilities and capacities or programs with their products bring back to move the dial? So private industry or consumer? Would someone like to answer that?
Hi, it has to be the companies. The reality is that the vast majority of consumers, that they are concerned about these things when you ask them. But time and time again, surveys show that when you ask somebody the question, they give you the right answer. You know, do you want to be responsible for child slave labor? Well, no, of course not. But when you go into the shop, you buy the thing that is in front of you. You buy the cheapest, right? And we see that time and time again. So the companies have to take the lead. Why is there a choice between a sustainable T-shirt and a non-sustainable T-shirt? Take the non-sustainable T-shirt out of the equation, the consumer will buy the sustainable one. So yes, we have to make it easier, and yes, they will do certain things, but changing individual behavior is incredibly hard, incredibly hard. Changing the products that we produce and the things we put out there is also hard, but it's easier than changing consumer behavior.
Good point. Han?
I just want to add on. I think both parties need to work on this. The consumer can create the market pool, and the company will sense the signal, and then they will take action, develop more sustainable solutions. For example, we have seen many brand owners take the lead, make a very bold commitment by 2025. They will make their packaging 100% recyclable, reusable, recoverable, because they see their consumers' demands, and then company will develop a solution. But we also need a government to put in the right policy, and if we have the right policy environment, this will accelerate the change, both consumer behavior and the company's action.
Okay, great. So some people would maybe also argue that companies who are putting out products and packaging are not actually paying the full price of that activity into the market. So they're getting, in a way, a free ride because the externalities of waste and packaging, the capacity to recover that, is not being borne enough by the industry, and that's extended producer responsibility. Do you think that needs to change to move the dial a little bit faster? And if so, should it be voluntary or should it be regulated? Yes, Ralph.
Thank you. I think we, unfortunately, YB Yeo is not going to like this, but I really feel that we live in a world of cognitive dissonance where we're all aware that, like smoking, we know how dangerous it is and how unhealthy it is, yet some people continue to smoke. Same thing with packaging. I think it's a regulatory issue. If we look at Taiwan and Korea, they reduced their municipal solid waste by about 30% after introducing charges and regulations and penalties. UK reduced their plastic bag usage by 80% through regulations and costs. So I think, unfortunately, it's got to be led by regulatory moves first. And then I think that cascades down, and companies follow, and then consumers hopefully will follow that as well.
Great. Nagu.
Yep, thank you. When we were, sorry about that. Yeah, when we were thinking about the roadmap from 2018 to 2030, we were thinking about a couple of pathways. We were thinking of whether to come up with regulatory kind of control straight away. But we realized that looking around the world, there are about 80 over countries having some actions on plastics. Those who introduce regulation probably are not as successful as they should be. Although I'm not saying the regulation is not important, but what we're trying to see is we're trying to form something quite similar to the UK, the Malaysian Plastic Pact, where we get the plastic associations, the businesses, the government, the NGOs to work together to start moving this idea of circularity of the plastics. So I think we work in a more joint manner rather than trying to regulate the industry straight away. It might be difficult because I think the issue here is because if we regulate straight away, you need the whole ecosystem to fall in place. For example, right from the home, I know many people diligently segregate, but their enthusiasm is short-lived when the truck comes in front of their house and puts everything into baggage. So if you're going to get the industry to move to biodegradable material, for example, I think the science behind biodegradable material, the composting of it, the facilities to do all that is probably not in place. So I think what we're trying to do is now trying to take a phased approach, work with the industry. There are many leaders in this, the big multinationals. We hope the small and medium scale will follow suit. And then probably at some point we'll do a review about how things are going. And then if we need be, then we'll start putting the stick in. So the only thing we have now is a voluntary polluter-pay principle kind of concept we're doing on plastic bags. Some states have started implementing it. But we feel a phased approach, as I elaborated earlier, will be probably more workable. Right?
Great. So you have something. Let's quickly twist this one. Anyone have a good example of a voluntary change that is being made now that others might be able to learn from or replicate from that's doing well?
Yes, I think that there are many examples. Let me give you one from our own industry. We make personal care products like shampoos and showers and so on. And we tried to work on making a shampoo which could be made with a cold process without the use of energy. And the R&D challenge was how do you make it as good as one that is made using heat and energy. And it took us time. It's taken us around 3 years, but we were able to crack it, right? And so there's an R&D effort that's involved. The consumer doesn't want to pay more, so you have to be able to offer it at the same cost and make it commercially viable. So this is one example. The second thing is that we've tried to take this approach around green factories. When we were looking at what we could do to be sustainable, what we found is that there were no standards and people were doing just too little. And so we felt that to set our own standards would be the right way to go about it, to find out where all we could contribute in terms of contributing to sustainability. So we picked on some easy wins. There was PVC plastics, which is the most harmful of plastics, and we said, can we eliminate it? And we are proud to say that in all our 7 factories that are there in our international business, we are 0 PVC. The second thing we said is there's a lot of waste that factories generate. A large part of it goes to landfill, and landfill is the most harmful of the waste. We are working towards being a 0 landfill factory. We've got 2 of our factories which have reached that point. It was something we learned from the competition, and because we found it could be done, we said, the first response from our teams was this can't be done. But once we started on the journey, now we've got one factory became 0 landfill, then everybody wanted to join the bandwagon. And that's what makes it exciting, and that's how at least we think that voluntary efforts do make a difference and can be done.
Right, so that's great. So sometimes there is advantage to be the first mover, to get the momentum, then the government can see that these things can be done. Obviously, the challenge with volunteerism is that there's free riders around the fringes who may make your decisions less competitive if they're not following, and that's probably where the government needs to come in with those regulations, say, look, it's possible, but now let's move everyone at the same rate. So one of the big confusing questions in the world of plastic is, what does single-use plastic mean? And how do you define a single use? Because if you really think about it, a lot of the very necessary packaging for a product to extend its shelf life is only used one time. But that's not really what a lot of governments think about when they make a single-use legislative change. Who would like to define single-use plastic? And do we need infrastructure specifically to go after any single-use plastic that's out there, depending how you define what that is? It's a challenge. We have experts here, and everyone in the world has the same debate, and it's tough, but someone take a stand. There's no right or wrong answer, actually, but we're trying to, because the public also doesn't know what does single-use mean to them. And when you say that you're using a straw, you have to remember that a candy wrapper, which might keep a piece of candy for 6 months, is still single use. So you're trying to ban them from having candy, or you're trying to ban them from having a straw. And we have to work together to put this into a system that's able to capture that kind of material from the plastics industry.
Yeah. Now, we talk about single-use plastics. There are many types of single-use plastics where, as pointed out, items like, for example, straw or cutleries, these items can be actually avoided. We can remove them. But on the other hand, there are other types of single-use plastics, for example, for the medical industries. This, for example, syringes and bag lining, this type of single-use plastics we can't avoid, at least for now, unless there's a new technology that been created in future or some innovation, then maybe we can also even consider the single use of for the medical products that can avoid it in future. But as it is now, we actually also encourage, from the perspective of the Plastics Association, is for us to actually eliminate the unnecessary plastics that is available in the market. Whichever that can be avoided, we should not use plastics. And at the same time, we also believe or agree that in future, instead of having a single-use plastic, we should move away to more of reuse plastics, which will be better for the economy. And hence, when we reuse the plastics, we do not have to go it to the environment. If it's single-use, usually it will end up into the environment. So this is what the Plastics Association also will be preaching and talking to all the in the value chain, that in future, instead of single-use plastics, we should move to reuse plastics. Right.
Okay, great. Martin?
So can I challenge it slightly by saying it's the wrong question?
What's the question?
Or rather, I really worry when we spend huge amounts of time trying to address an issue like, let's define single-use plastics. And I'm blaming you, you didn't come up with this, right? And I get why it's out there as a thing. But then we spend hours and hours and years trying to define this narrow category. And actually, we're addressing the question from the wrong side. It's not about banning single-use plastics. If we take a truly system perspective on what we're trying to achieve here, we're trying to achieve zero waste. We're trying to achieve closed-loop systems. We're trying to ensure that products and services do not harm people and the planet. If they are your design criteria that you're putting into any product, then we bypass the need to define a single-use plastic. Because whatever it is we're producing ultimately is done in such a way that it's biodegradable, or it's reusable, or as an alternative approach, or maybe it is plastic, maybe it is only used once, but it's captured in a closed-loop system because it's designed and made in such a way that it's the right type of material that can be put back into the system, turned around, and brought back out again. So actually, let's not get weighed down by sort of answering the wrong questions. Let's take a step back, let's work out what that system solution we're trying to come up with, and then get the right product.
Okay, you must have read my next question, which was impossible because
I really did, sorry.
But it leads into that. So whether you argue, and I totally agree with what you're saying, single use is not the main issue, but some people say, should we design away from single use? Which goes to your point about designing a system. But the other question is it design or is it a marketer's responsibility to get away from throwaway things that are used once, which are not necessary for that product's use? Is that a marketer's choice or a design choice? Would anyone like to take that?
it's not a market or design choice. It's how we fix incentives. That is what signals which way we will move. And there's a sequencing issue as well. Dr. Nagu said we need to come in with some regulation, and that's inevitable. I think the empirical evidence says we are going towards regulation. But that also needs to go with an incentives regime, which is what will trigger the changes, create the signals for moving to alternatives. The one thing, though, is we have to find the low-hanging fruit, and one of those is packaging. And going back to YB's point about the fourth R, $80 to $100 billion worth of packaging going straight to waste. I mean, that we can easily tweak to create the incentives that for R&D. It's all about signaling from the market. The last part of that sequencing is behavior change, individually, collectively, corporately, government level. And that takes time. It's not easy. Each of us struggle with behavior change, even in our private lives. Separating waste, not using certain kinds of products. And sometimes it's just not possible to make an immediate shift. Again, I think the sequencing question and the incentives question, which are kind of important, a fourth dimension we need to introduce into this.
Okay. Did someone else want to say something? I thought there was a hand there.
Okay. It's a very good question, and the single use. I think besides thinking about whether we use this material, no matter it's packaging or something one time or multiple times, we need to think from a life cycle perspective. What is the benefit of this material? Sometimes a single use, and they may even provide a better environmental benefit or impact compared to alternatives. Using straw as an example, if you want to replace plastic with a metal straw, last time I went to a conference, they gave me a metal straw, and they even gave me a very nice pipe cleaner to clean that metal straw. But I asked people, hey, have you considered how many times you need to reuse this metal straw to break even with a single-use plastic straw? None of them thought about it, and they never think about the life cycle impact. And the answer is 3,000 times, which means if you drink one cocktail per day, you have to drink 10 years to break even with a single-use plastic straw. I'm not here to advocate for plastic straw. I just want people to think more broadly from a life cycle perspective, and also encourage sustainable consumption. I think that's the key thing, not about the single use or multiple use. You don't use if you don't need to use that material.
Yeah, luckily you can still drink without a straw. This is an economic question on recycling, because a lot of people, and Minister, you mentioned this, that only 10% of the world's plastic that is produced actually gets recycled, which is a shocking number when everyone, as a consumer, looks at the bottom of the package and sees a triangle and it says, "Recycle me now." They don't realize that it cannot be recycled in most systems. So why is recycling not economical? And is the reason for that partly because we're not putting the positive externality of the benefit of pollution control and clean cities into the value of the recycling process? And therefore there's money not on the table for the recycling system to really get its wheels turning and the snowball moving. Does that make sense? Why is recycling so difficult? Why is it not happening at the scale that it should be happening from country to country? Does anyone want to take that?
Just from my perspective, I just give it a shot. I think most of the time it's because of cost. It's just about money. For example, most of the containers that we see, like that exported to Malaysia, that you will see they are mixed contaminated plastic waste. A lot of technology at this moment, they need clean, separated, homogeneous waste, and to produce a high-value resin that make economic sense to invest. We do not yet have enough, I think, technology that are able to treat mixed contaminated plastic waste and yet earn a profit from it. Because when you want the private to move, there must be a business case from it. So I think in terms of technological breakthrough, there are a lot of people talking about pyrolysis and how do we that. Because as a matter of fact, in the whole world, except with the developed country, most of the people do not separate their waste. Most of the waste are contaminated. Most of the waste end up in landfill because modern waste treatment plant is expensive in most of the country. So this is the fact that we need to think. But whenever policymakers or developed countries are thinking about the waste problem, they keep thinking about separating, making it clean, making a recycle. It's not going to work. It's not going to work in the developing country and the least developed world. If we want to solve the problem of the global problem like plastic, we need to then have a breakthrough in terms of innovation of how, in terms of life cycle, to be able to say that how do we treat mixed plastic waste at a profitable manner. Then we can solve when there is money, people move to it. Yeah.
Okay, so that is a great point. And what sort of maybe complements that, or another way to think about it, is the technologies are often here, but the challenge is the social piece, which comes back to the consumers of getting the material in a more pure manner so that at scale and volume, you can have these machines work. So is the challenge also that our waste collection systems are ill-suited for today's waste streams of multi-variety plastic types? Would anyone like to comment on that?
I'll give you an example from the UK, which is pretty advanced. Generally, we're pretty good. We separate out our waste. The county I live in is Hertfordshire, which is just north of London. We have friends who live about 20 miles away in Cambridgeshire. Where I live, you cannot recycle soft plastic, so magazine wrappings or wrappings around cans, that type of thing. In Cambridgeshire, they can. We actually save up our soft plastic waste, and when we go to visit our friends, the first thing we give them as a gift is our waste plastic. That's sort of what lovely friends we are, because they can recycle it. But are you really telling me that 20 miles away, the technology is different? It's crazy. It's money, it's incentive, but people will do it if you put the infrastructure in place. But it's not. For years and years and years, we've had the bin trucks come around once a week, take all the mixed waste, off it goes. So no, the infrastructure is not in place.
Right.
We have the technologies there, the infrastructure is not. So what's the thing that's in the way? It's cost. Either the government has to pay for it, or directly the consumer has to pay for it. Somebody somewhere has to pay for this.
Right. Okay. So,
Doug,
yes.
Add on.
Han.
So there are many reasons why plastic recycling is very challenging, why the recycling rate is low. We can talk about it all day. But here I just want to mention one thing is a lack of value chain collaboration. For a long, long time, if you look at the plastic recycling, the big player is left out of the recycling value chain, which is the resin manufacturer. So when people collect plastic waste back to the system, they try to recycle it back to plastic product, they send it to a converter. However, before the converter is the larger plastic resin manufacturer like Dow Chemical and many other companies. And those companies are not included in the value chain. And now those chemical companies realize the situation, and we really want to solve the problem. So if you look at the recent news, we just announced our collaboration with a company called Phoenix in Europe, and we want to collect the post-consumer recycled plastic bag and then use feedstock recycling technology to break down those waste plastic back to monomer stage, and then we can produce a virgin quality plastic out of those post-consumer recycled content. And many companies in the industry is working on this kind of opportunity.
Great. So for those of you who, that's called chemical recycling, where you're taking mixed dirty plastic and basically taking it back to the polymer state into a virgin. So one,
Can I just add on?
Yes, sorry.
I think there's a huge demand for recycled plastics. And I also know that certain types of plastics are also shortage in Malaysia, the recycled plastics. Now, from my perspective, currently probably the collection of the plastics maybe it is not, I wouldn't want to say it's not well organized, but there is an issues of proper collections of plastics. And we need to obviously segregate. It can be done, Proper collection, segregation, and obviously they have to do a proper cleaning with a proper waste treatment. These plastics can be recycled, and there's many value to it. So now I feel that there's obviously a need between us, the Plastics Association, as well as the recyclers and the local governments to discuss on the ways of how do we collect these plastics effectively, and we will work together with the recyclers, which are actually looking for demand for this plastics recycling for us to reuse in the other types of products, right?
So that leads me exactly into this question. How do we get more use of second life plastic? Second life plastic is that which has been reincarnated into a new life and a new product. How can we get brands to use more? Is that from consumers wanting it? How can we get governments to use more in tender processes? The more demand you have for that second life plastic, the more the recyclers can do their work. So what can we do as industry or companies, or maybe some of the companies out here, that can help be a leader in driving this use? Any suggestions or comments?
Very simple, Doug. We need a strong enrollment campaign based on data and evidence. There's very little data and authoritative studies that actually make the link between, say, asset value and reuse. There's very little enrollment-ready data and evidence that educates consumers about separation, the point that YB made about not getting good enough, well enough separated waste. And finally, there's the positive externality. There isn't enough. There are very few studies making this case. So a broad enrollment campaign is what we need. And not as an us and them issue, but a co-created enrollment campaign. I think that's one area where we need to focus, and we need help from our research and data and science community for that.
Okay. Does anyone else have a comment on that? Second life plastic, how to increase the demand?
Well, just to add to what you said, we find that one is the commercial challenge. When you commit to it, that can you get the recycled plastic to be, is it available in sufficient quantity to be able to put back into the product? So what we find is that, for example, for us, we're working at around 25% level of plastics that are recycled at this point of time. But we find that some players have announced that they intend to move towards 100%. So if they can move, we believe we can move too. So we are trying to figure out how to do it, right? Sometimes the answer may lie in going through a global sourcing. There are challenges in that too. We have some countries, for example, which don't allow us to sell in black. And if that happens to be the color the consumer likes, it becomes a challenge, because black is apparently a very difficult plastic to sort out, right? So it also needs some amount of consumer advocacy of the change. So there would be multiple stakeholders that would need to participate in this. But industry needs to take the first step forward. And I would agree with you that by taking commitments as to how much of recycled plastics they would use is the first step. At least that is something that we would be strongly looking at.
So for those of you not aware too much, there's a giant war out there that's first time ever brewing between brands in different industries with the likes of Coke and Pepsi and Nestle against Adidas and Nike, because they're all swarming to look for supply chains of recycled PET for their either fabric or their bottles. And they can't find them because sometimes the collection systems aren't there. So when the governments often, or even the environmentalists, talk about fixing the plastic problem, they often look at sticks. And the sticks are legislative changes, or their bans, or their taxes, or their requirements on reduction. Very few speaking about tax incentives and other incentives that will drive innovation, investment, entrepreneurial activities. Minister, you mentioned some of the tax incentives here, but what is being done on the driving side of capacity building in this space that might be innovative for either brands to take advantage of or other governments? Anyone like to? Yeah.
I think there should be a very happy working relationship between extended producer responsibility and also things like environmental tech, so like Costa Rica, Japan. So you create infrastructure through the environmental tax or the waste tax or as a type of fee, but the extended producer responsibility has to tie in with that so that you get both parties working together to create a system or infrastructure that's actually going to function well. Consumers hopefully will push from the bottom. So this week we've seen, I think, Trader Joe's and Unilever both make pledges on single-use plastic. There's very good things happening. There's very positive announcements being made, but I think we need to see more on extended producer responsibility being tied in with a type of environmental tax to create the infrastructure that's going to be necessary. So if you compare Japan and Singapore, Japan has that. They've been working on it since the 1950s. Singapore had the opportunity, but 80% of people live in HDBs. So there's about 4.5% recycling of plastic. It's one of the lowest in the world because there's no infrastructure. There's also no incentive. There's also no extended producer responsibility. So I think it has to go back to that.
Okay, so what I was also getting at, though, was positive incentives for investors to want to put in $1 million, $5 million, and get a tax break, which is, I think, what Malaysia is offering. So can that be done more to drive more investment into recycling industry or reuse industry, bioindustry?
Actually, we also have tax incentive for bioresin manufacturing here. Most of the things that Malaysian government are looking at is mostly on the incentives part of the regulations, for a simple reason that we are always comparing ourselves to, for example, Singapore, UK, developed countries. But the country actually needs to develop, and we need to be business friendly in terms of how we actually regulate it. What is our regulatory impact towards people who are investing in Malaysia? So there are a lot of consideration as a government in terms of putting stick into the entire system. So we are open for, we actually have incentives for many of the green activities and green services. We also have green income tax exemption. Those who are actually in green business and some categories of green business, your income is tax exempted. So this is how we actually empower our people, giving incentives. Hopefully people will move into this new green industry. We believe green industry is a new frontier for growth. As a developing country, we see it as not only about saving the world, is really about how do we leverage this to develop our economy. I think our perspectives are different. Although I'm an environment minister, I have to speak on behalf of Malaysians that in need of putting more money into the pockets of the people as well. So what we want is to really exhaust the alternatives we have that do not punish people or giving unnecessary sticks to the people. only when it is necessary. So we really are in the face of the first part of it, exhausting the current whatever solutions that we have that will not punish businesses, that will encourage businesses, that will encourage investment and create jobs.
Great. So Ray, do we have a time for a question? We might have one. We do? I think we're almost out, but one public question, I think.
Right, let's put up the slide of questions. If you're on your phone, you can also check what the top question is. Akila? So we can all see the first, the top question. All right, the top question we have over here, perhaps, Doug, can you see it from there?
Yes.
Okay, you want to go ahead with
Sure.
the top? All right.
Mr. Kumar Chander, the FMCGs are the largest contributor to modern waste in terms of plastic packaging, yet not much actions are taken. Do you have a plan? Very broad question. And
Yeah. So the answer is yes, we do have a plan, but I don't think we can do it alone. And so our plan involves taking stakeholders with us. Our stakeholders include our employees, it includes our customers, and it also includes the statutory bodies that, which can facilitate some of this in terms of the plastic packaging. What we have tried to do consciously is to reduce the amount of plastic that we use so that we're not giving away extra packaging that the consumer doesn't need. How can we be minimalistic in our approach? That's the first objective. The second is, as the Honorable Minister had mentioned, that is also a cost reason. When you use less plastic, the product becomes more economical, and we can sell it at a more economical price to the customer. And so we've done a lot of science around that. We discovered, for example, that when you make a plastic bottle, it's not the same thickness everywhere. And just by ensuring that some places it's thin and some places it's thick, and we can reduce the plastic content by almost 20% just by designing our molds better. So these are the areas that we've looked at, and therefore our plastic usage compared to 2013-14 is around 30% lower per ton of product that we sell. And that translates into roughly more than 1 million tons of plastic reduced over the last, say, 5 years.
right, so that's the plastic intensity per GDP of dollar or product.
Per product sold, yeah.
Right, great. Are we
I think we have time for just one more question.
one more? The one on the top here is, why isn't plastic policy not standardized around the country? Every states have their own policies, and it's difficult for businesses who have operations across many states.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an excellent question. The reason we came out with the roadmap till 2030 is actually for this very reason. As you know, Malaysia is a federalized system of government. We've got 13 states, and they've got right over local government. So the states which are on the west coast, Selangor, Penang, had taken a leapfrog. So like Penang has got a very good procedure where they use polluter pay principle, you pay for plastics. Selangor followed the same, and Wilayah decided to go on the biodegradable pathway. So in our roadmap, if you read the roadmap, the first phase is trying to get every state government to, by 2021, to come up with a plan for plastics. And we are capacity building each state government because they are all in different phases of growth and also capacity. So we had workshops with them on how they can then start having a uniform kind of approach towards plastic bags and straws. Yeah. So it's by 2021, yeah.
Great. Well, I think with that, let's thank our panelists. That was a very excellent panel, and I hope some of them, I'm sure, will be around at coffee break and can answer questions. So thank you very much for a great discussion.
Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you to our panel.
Thank you.
For the CEO Roundtable on Marine Debris, Responsible Consumption Plastics and Circular Economy for Plastics. And of course, as our moderator said, many of our CEOs and speakers, our eminent speakers, will be around today and tomorrow. For those of you who put forward your questions and you find that some of them have not had a chance to be answered, do catch our speakers later on.